You know what used to keep me up at night? Not the big mistakes, not the board I cut too short, or the door I hung crooked. It was the slow failures, the tabletop that looked perfect in October and had a crack running down the middle by February, the mortise and tenon that fit like a glove on Tuesday and was rattling loose by spring. I kept thinking I was doing something wrong, and I was, but not in the way I expected. A few years back, I started studying how traditional Japanese woodworkers approach the craft, and I realized something humbling. Problems I'd been fighting my entire life in the shop, wood movement, joint failure, rough surfaces, finishing headaches, these craftsmen solved most of them centuries ago. And their solutions are so elegant, it almost makes you mad. Nobody taught us this from the beginning. Today, I'm going to walk you through 10 modern woodworking problems that Japanese masters figured out long before we were born. And stick around to the end because I'll show you a marking technique I picked up that's so simple and so precise, you'll wonder why you ever used a pencil line. Let's get into it. What makes traditional Japanese woodworking so worth studying isn't that it's exotic or mysterious, it's that it's deeply practical. These methods were developed by working tradesmen solving real problems with real materials, and almost everything they figured out translates directly to what we deal with in a home shop today. So let me start with some context, and then we'll get into the techniques one by one. Japan is an island nation that sits right on top of major fault lines. Earthquakes are a fact of life, and for most of their history, wood was the primary building material. Not brick, not stone, wood. So when a Japanese temple carpenter built a structure, it had to survive lateral movement, extreme humidity swings from wet summers to dry winters, and it had to be repairable without tearing the whole thing apart. On top of that, their most available timber was softwood, hinoki cypress, Japanese cedar, species that are beautiful but not as forgiving as the hard maple or white oak we tend to reach for. So they couldn't just muscle through problems with dense wood and heavy hardware. They had to be smarter about how they read a board, how they cut a joint, and how they thought about what that piece of wood would do 10 or 50 years down the road. There's a principle in Japanese woodworking that roughly translates to reading the wood. The idea is that every board has a nature, a direction it wants to move, a way it wants to behave as it dries and ages, and your job as the craftsman is to understand that nature before you make your first cut. When I first heard that, I thought it sounded like philosophy. But once I started applying it, I realized it's the most practical advice I've ever gotten. Problem number 1, wood movement and seasonal cracking. This is probably the single biggest frustration for anyone who builds with solid wood. You do everything right, and the wood still moves. Most of us deal with this by trying to control the wood. We kiln dry it. We seal the end grain. We clamp it flat and hope for the best. Japanese woodworkers take a completely different approach. Instead of fighting the movement, they design for it. They orient boards so the natural curve of the grain works with the structure instead of against it. When they build a panel, they alternate the heart side and bark side of each board, so that as the wood expands and contracts, the forces balance out instead of all pulling in one direction. They also pay close attention to where a board came from on the log. A board cut from the north side of a tree that grew on a hillside behaves differently than one from the south side. That level of attention to grain orientation is something most of us skip entirely, and it's the main reason our panels crack. Problem number 2. Joints that hold without glue or fasteners. I used to think a strong joint meant a tight joint plus plenty of wood glue. Then I saw a traditional Japanese scarf joint, an okake daisutsugi, and it changed how I think about joinery entirely. This joint connects two beams end to end with an interlocking geometry that actually gets tighter under load. No glue, no bolts. Just wood engaging wood through carefully angled surfaces that wedge together when weight is applied. The precision required is extreme. We're talking tolerances of a few thousandths of an inch, cut, with hand saws and chisels. But the principle behind it is simple. If you design the geometry so that the forces in use, gravity, compression, lateral load, actually drive the joint tighter instead of pulling it apart, you don't need adhesive, you need understanding. I started applying this thinking to my own mortise and tenon joints, angling the shoulders just slightly so the tenon wedges as the rail is loaded. And the difference in long-term joint integrity has been remarkable. By the way, if you are enjoying learning about these ancient methods, I put together something I think you will really appreciate. It is called Kenji's Workshop, and it is a collection of 100 ancient Eastern woodworking secrets for the modern craftsman. Techniques like the ones we are covering today, and a whole lot more. You can grab your copy by scanning the QR code on screen, or just use the first link in the description. All right, let us keep going. Problem number 3. Finishing surfaces without sandpaper. This one genuinely shocked me. Japanese woodworkers don't sand. They finish surfaces with a hand plane called a kana. And I don't mean a rough smoothing pass. I mean the final surface ready for finish comes straight off the blade. When I first ran my hand across a board finished with a properly tuned kana, it felt like polished stone. Here's why it works. Sandpaper tears wood fibers. It leaves microscopic scratches that scatter light and dull the surface. A razor-sharp plane blade severs the fibers cleanly, leaving a burnished surface that actually reflects light. The grain pops in a way sanding can never achieve. It takes practice, and it demands a level of sharpening most of us aren't used to, but even using a well-tuned Western smoother with a blade honed to a mirror edge, you can get close. Once you see the difference, you'll never want to pick up sandpaper for a final surface again. Problem number 4. Making structures survive earthquakes and shifting. Most Western joinery is designed to be rigid. We want things tight and immovable, but rigid connections snap under lateral force. Japanese temple carpenters figured out that a building needs to flex to survive. Their joints allow controlled movement. A beam can shift slightly in its socket during an earthquake, absorb the energy, and settle back into place. The Horyuji Temple near Nara has been standing for over 1,300 years through countless earthquakes. That's not luck. That's engineering. For furniture makers, the lesson is the same. A little flexibility in the right places, a slightly elongated mortise, a floating panel prevents catastrophic failure when the wood moves seasonally. Problem number 5. Sharpening that actually lasts. I spent years chasing the perfect sharpening system, jigs, guides, diamond plates, scary sharp setups on glass. Then I watched a Japanese craftsman sharpen a chisel on natural waterstones, and I realized I'd been overcomplicating everything. They use a progression of stones, typically starting around 1,000 grit and finishing at 6,000 or 8,000 grit, working freehand with consistent pressure and angle. The key difference is they sharpen more often but spend less time each session. A quick touch-up every 30 minutes of work keeps the edge performing at its peak. Most of us wait until the tool is noticeably dull, then spend 20 minutes grinding back to sharp. The Japanese approach means you're always working with a fresh edge, and your tools last longer because you're removing less steel each time. Problem number 6. Fixing mistakes without starting over. Every woodworker has stared at a blown-out mortise or a chisel slip and felt their stomach drop. Japanese craftsmen developed an approach to repair that treats fixes as part of the craft, not a failure. They use Dutchman patches cut from matching grain with such precision that the repair becomes nearly invisible. They also use a technique of steaming dents out of softwood with a wet cloth and a hot iron, raising crushed fibers back to their original position. The underlying philosophy is that wood is a living material and perfection isn't the goal. Honest craftsmanship is. That mindset alone has saved me from scrapping more workpieces than I can count. Problem number 7. Choosing the right board for the right place. Most of us pick boards based on appearance and maybe straightness of grain. Japanese woodworkers select boards based on where on the tree they came from and where in the project they'll be used. Heartwood goes where strength and rot resistance matter. Sapwood, which is more flexible, goes where a little give is acceptable. Boards from the base of the tree, which grew under compression, get used in structural roles. Boards from higher up, which are lighter and more uniform, get used for visible surfaces. This kind of intentional selection takes a few extra minutes at the lumber yard, but it means every board in your project is doing the job it's best suited for. Problem number 8. Flattening wide panels without machinery. Before thickness planers and drum sanders, Japanese craftsmen flattened wide boards and glue-ups entirely by hand. They use a dainaoshi, a plane-setting hammer, to adjust their kana with incredible precision and then take long, overlapping strokes across the full width of the panel. The technique relies on winding sticks, 2 straight battens placed across the panel to reveal any twist. They check constantly, plane the high spots, and repeat. It's slower than running a board through a planer, but the surface quality is superior, and you never have to worry about snipe or tear out from a machine. Even if you own a thickness planer, using winding sticks to check your work afterward is a habit worth adopting. Problem number 9. Making tight joints in imperfect lumber. Here's something that frustrated me for years. I'd cut a joint to exact dimensions, and it wouldn't fit right, because the wood wasn't perfectly straight or flat. Japanese joiners expect imperfection. They use a technique called suri aways, which means rubbing together. After cutting a joint, they ink the mating surface, press the pieces together, and the ink transfers to the high spots. They pare those spots down, re-ink, and repeat until full contact is achieved. It's essentially hand-lapping a joint to a custom fit. The result is a connection that's tighter than anything you'll get from machine tolerances alone, because it accounts for the actual reality of that specific piece of wood. Problem number 10. Building furniture that ages beautifully. Most of us apply a finish to protect wood and make it look good on day 1. Japanese craftsmen think about day 10,000. They use natural finishes like tung oil, lacquer derived from the urushi tree, and even plain beeswax, chosen specifically because they age gracefully. Urushi lacquer actually gets harder and more beautiful with decades of exposure. But beyond finishes, they design with aging in mind. They position grain so that patina develops evenly. They leave surfaces hand-planed so the wood breathes and develops character. They think about how sunlight will hit a piece over the years and orient boards accordingly. It's a completely different relationship with time, and it produces furniture that your grandchildren will fight over. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years, things I used to do myself that this tradition handles completely differently. No judgment here. I did all of these for longer than I'd like to admit. The first pattern is reaching for glue as the default solution. Most of us treat wood glue as an essential part of every joint, but if your joint needs glue to stay together, the geometry isn't doing its job. Japanese joiners design the geometry to do the holding. Glue becomes insurance, not structure. The second pattern is sanding everything to the same grit. I used to sand every surface to 220 and call it done. But different surfaces in a project have different needs. Visible faces deserve a planned or higher grit finish. Interior surfaces don't need the same treatment. Matching your finishing effort to the function of each surface saves time and produces better results. The third pattern is fighting wood instead of reading it. I can't tell you how many times I forced a board into a project because it was the right size, even though the grain was fighting me the whole way. Learning to read the wood first and select boards based on their nature instead of just their dimensions has eliminated more problems than any tool I've ever bought. The fourth pattern is treating repairs as failures. A Dutchman patch done well is a sign of skill, not a sign of a mistake. Once I stopped seeing repairs as shameful and started seeing them as part of the craft, my work got better, and my stress level dropped considerably. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. This one comes from watching a temple carpenter lay out joinery, and it's so simple I almost didn't believe it mattered. Instead of using a pencil to mark cut lines, try using a marking knife and making your line with a single, light scoring cut directly on the wood fibers. Japanese craftsmen use a tool called a shirabiki, a cutting gauge that scores a clean line exactly where the chisel needs to land. Here's why this matters. A pencil line has width. Depending on how sharp your pencil is, that line might be a 32nd of an inch wide. Which side of the line do you cut to? With a knife line, there is no ambiguity. The scored line creates a tiny wall that your chisel registers against perfectly. I started using a marking knife for all my joinery layout about 3 years ago, and my joints got tighter almost overnight. You don't need a Japanese shirabiki. A simple marking knife or even a sharp utility knife will do the job. Just score your line, register your chisel in the groove, and cut. The precision difference is immediate. One more thing before I let you go. I spent a long time gathering the best ancient Eastern woodworking methods I have come across, and I put them all into a book called Kenji's Workshop. 100 techniques that most modern woodworkers have never seen, with step-by-step photos and clear explanations you can actually follow in your shop. Scan the QR code on screen right now or grab it from the first link in the description. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.